Hi, my name is Adrian Morales, and I would love to tell you about the article Tracking in High School English Learners by Rebecca Callahan, 2005. It covers the concept of tracking. I would describe it as the separating of low performing students from high performing students so that the high performing students can thrive while the low performing students are taught at a lower pace with less academic content and then expected to catch up somehow. However, Callahan argues that this instead creates differential academic achievement outcomes, benefiting the high track students. And here we see an image of a railroad operator to represent the idea of an institutional operator manually switching tracks on which students will travel. Some will go off to college, the high track students, and the low track students do not go off to college, basically. Uh, Also, the students inadvertently stay on the low track due to lack of institutional knowledge, like what college courses to take. Um, Tracking also relates to linguistic capital because the educational system values the dominant language, which is English, as a form of social exchange to get into higher academic level courses. There's also the concept of deficit perspective because students are labeled, for example, limited English proficiency or LEP students. There's also the concept of deficit discourse because teachers have these beliefs that are racialized and that they see English language learners as less intelligent. And then there's symbolic violence because there's this imposition of this habitus of English language dominant culture. I couldn't help but slip in a quick cultural reference. The Simpsons covered tracking. Bart was placed in a remedial class, and the teacher's saying that they have to go slower, basically, and he says, "Wait, let me get this straight. We're behind the rest of our class, and we're going to catch up to them by going slower." Some of the main ideas include that tracking and sorting programs institutionalize inequality. For example, English language learners are isolated linguistically and academically compared to their high track students. The idea is negative social capital begets negative social capital. When English language learners are placed in these programs, they are often too restrictive of social mobility. For example, if they're not English proficient according to the standards, then they're not allowed to move on to content area classes, which are classes that prepare students for college readiness, basically. And academic content quality varies by track. In low track classrooms, there is less instruction of academic language and content. In problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, the assignments are focused mostly on memorization, and there are more lower order thinking objectives, teaching objectives. English learners are seen as a homogeneous group as well by a lot of researchers and administrators. Callahan's study divides them or groups them into three groups, taking account length of residency and previous schooling into account. Also, high track students become college ready. They're exposed to more content in language and skills in their content areas. Low track students are exposed to low quality teaching and academic content. English learner programs trap students essentially because they can't move on to these higher content area academic classes. Tracking and sorting is not meritocratic according to Callahan due to the selection based on socioeconomic and racial background and also the values or beliefs by teachers in the institution that these students deserve to be taught less than the higher track students. Also, Callahan argues that there's too much emphasis on English proficiency, and her study emphasizes that English language learners can benefit from more rigorous academic language and content area instruction to become college ready. Callahan's research question was: does track placement or English proficiency predict the academic achievement of high school English learners? She grouped English learners into three cohorts, and I'd like to tell you a bit about the results and each cohort. Also, she determined academic achievement. She measured it by looking at six academic achievement types like GPA, standardized tests in reading and writing, and other tests. So, for the results for long term English learners, defined as those who can exit English language proficiency programs, these are the students that are stuck in these programs. In California, where she did her study, there's 5 levels, and the students are expected to progress one level each year. But these students are stuck in these 5 year programs up to 7 years. They're orally proficient in English, but they have poor reading and writing skills and a poor grasp of academic English. Regarding their scores, they had the lowest academic achievement scores on 3 out of the 6 measurements, including GPA, credit, ratio, and standardized tests and math scores. They also scored the highest in total reading. They had the lowest GPA and the lowest amount of course credits. The next group is the recent immigrants with high amounts of previous schooling. So these are the students that have gained great level academic content. They might need only a little bit of English literacy skills instruction. They scored the highest on GPA, credit ratio, and in math as well. They they had slightly higher courses in college preparation coursework. And then the next group is recent immigrants with limited previous schooling. These are students that have missed at least 1 year of schooling prior to moving to that specific high school, and they need both literacy skills and content area development before they can access the high school curriculum. So they're also like barred from taking courses due to English language skills. So they scored slightly higher GPAs than long-term English learners, slightly higher credits than long-term English learners. They scored slightly higher in standardized math and language than recent immigrants with high amounts of previous schooling. All 3 of the cohorts were below average or the cutoff for the academic achievement necessary for college eligibility. Also, separating English learners into 3 cohorts revealed that academic preparation explained academic achievement more than just English proficiency did. And so, Callahan argues that support for instructional quality over linguistic quantity. Callahan describes tracking and sorting as an intervention gone wrong. As kind of described already, it's removal of low performing students from the environment so that high performing students can thrive, and expecting the low performing students to catch up by being taught at a lower academic content level. Also, why does it persist? It is also a belief that sorting students by ability and then assigning the lower quality curricula actually enhances their learning. And it's also part, I would say, stigma or stereotype, because Callahan mentions that teachers have this expectation that if you're a struggling English language learner, you have lower intelligence, and then that affects their motivation and the way that they teach. There's also the linguistic achievement gap, which is a difference in academic performance between the English proficient students and the English learners. And what does LEP mean? It's a limited English proficient student, and that's a very deficit based definition. And then long term English learners, these are the students that are trapped in these programs that they can't get out of these interventions to enroll in higher higher thinking level classes that are preparing them that should prepare them for college. One surprising insight is that a lot of these processes are unconscious or hidden. For example, the racialized teacher expectations of English language learners that affects their motivation and also the content that they teach. Another thing is the unintended segregation or the de facto segregation that comes about as an unintended result of this intervention that is supposed to help students, but it actually hinders them and it traps them and then eventually just kicks them out of the system without preparing them for college. And basically, the hidden processes, like how the initial tracking and sorting is based on socioeconomic and racial background, but then these effects are minimized by the length of time in track placement. So that's why perhaps these ideologies related to meritocracy survive and continue. There's also Callahan mentions a lot of need for improvement and ways to improve. But to me, I was thinking, well, if if we need improved instruction quality and pedagogy, does it lead to teacher burnout? Because I've been a teacher and I've seen this in real life. And the mainstream classrooms, they have they don't have as many students as the low track student classrooms do, which are packed up to like 30 students at a time. So if a teacher is differentiating learning and writing lesson plans for 30 students, that's going to lead to burnout. So I mean, who's going to do the quality instruction and pedagogy? They need a a better type of solution. Maybe I need to brush up on my statistics, but I found the graphs kind of difficult to read, especially the box and whiskers plot box. Also, I would like to see more qualitative data, like the perspective from teachers and students, to kind of trace how they tracked and sorted or were tracked and sorted, and to see how conscious or unconscious these processes are. Also, more details on the actual tracking and sorting, and if the parents were aware that this was going on, or were the counselors involved. Was it the teacher handpicking the student and then just saying this one is out? How did it work? Were they tested initially for English language skills? It's unclear. Also, more information on the difference between general track and high track. And Callahan mentioned general track and high track, but we don't really know their characteristics or how students become high track. Are these just like the average students that are left behind, or are they, what are their characteristics, right? We don't know. I did make a lot of connections to other readings. For example, the concept of the deficit perspective, how students are labeled limited English proficiency, for example, or how they're seen as less intelligent. And then there's like colorblind racism because the tracking and sorting basically creates de facto segregation. The willful blindness by teachers to the institutional agents who should act as agents of adaptive change, right? The habitus congruence, but instead they're barriers to higher education. And then the transformation of habitus doesn't occur for low track students because they are separated from the high track students. So how are they ever going to get the cultural capital, the language skills, and the academic skills, and the social skills to move on? There's also the linguistic capital as being most important for Latinos, according to Ayala and Contreras, 2019. Right? They don't get the linguistic capital if you're on low track, in the low track class. Also, there's symbolic violence, right? Because all these, all these barriers are being imposed on English language learners. Whereas Callahan says, well, uh, language is not limiting. What's limiting them is that they're not being taught academic language and academic content. Also, power relations that disadvantage English learners. Um, those are some of the things that I thought about. So here are my two questions for you all. How do you think that the hidden curriculum about diversity, is covered in Esposito 2011, applies to students that have been placed in low track and high track pathways? And how would you describe the effects of tracking of English learners in terms of cultural capital and habitus, as described in Edgerton and Roberts 2014. Here is a reference. Thank you for watching.